Welcome back. So on deck today is going to be another ballistics test using the car windshield. So in the last video I posted about the 9mm 127 grain plus P plus Ranger T series, I stated that I wanted to put this round through a car windshield since it has a pretty good following amongst law enforcement that have used it. Still in use today. It is an older design, but it did perform fairly well in the previous test we did, which was heavy clothing and things of that nature. So I want to see how that performs through a car windshield, since it is a medium weight, high velocity, non-bonded bullet, but it does have it has incorporated in it some design features that are supposed to help it with things like hard barriers such as car windshield. The nature in which the jacket is stamped into the hollow cavity is supposed to, in theory anyway, provides the harder copper jacket to protect the hollow point cavity, and also in theory prevents the jacket from being stripped off of the round as it's passing through a hard barrier. Now, is that actually going to be enough to hold that jacket on there going through a car windshield? I don't know. I have my doubts, but that's what I want to see. I want to see how this medium weight, high velocity, non-bonded bullet, but still a popular and respected round in the law enforcement community, how does it perform through a barrier such as car windshield? And we're also bringing out the 40 cal again. This time we're going to be using the 180 grain Federal HST. So had obviously a lot of requests from the first video we put up from the car windshield. There's a lot of controversy. I did a second video and we used 165 grain HST along with the Ranger bonded 9mm 147 grain plus P, and did a little comparison there. And of course, people were in the comments, obviously you're never using the right bullet. So it's okay, I hear you guys. We're going to throw the 180 grain HST with the 40 cal, and also we're going to put the Speer G2 Gold Dot 9mm. Now we did this one once in the past with the car windshield, but the jugs we used, we found out later, may have skewed some penetration results. So I want to go ahead and throw this one through there as well using the same jugs we've always used, so we can get some nice consistent data, and also see, is there a reason why the FBI, this loading in particular, is kind of what swayed the FBI into going back to 9mm full time. And if all this works out and we have room enough materials, we're also going to try to do a 10mm. Now this is my hand load, and it is a 200 grain XTP at about 1135-ish, 1140-ish feet per second from G20, but it has a modification to the projectile where I've attempted to lock the jacket to the core. And in the previous test we did with this round, with the modification, it performed quite well. So I'm curious to see if this cup and core design bullet, with my attempt to lock the jacket to the core, is sufficient to actually hold that jacket onto the projectile going through a car windshield. Yeah, that'll be interesting. So it's 200 grain, and it's I guess the fairly full powered anyway, 200 grain XTP with a little modification. So but that's what we want to see. Kind of a little bit of a comparison video, but not necessarily. It's more of a curiosity video on the part of these two rounds, and then we want to just see how I guess it is a comparison with the G2 and the 180 grain HST, since these are kind of two premier law enforcement projectiles for their respective calibers. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you the setup, and then we'll get this going. And here's the setup. We have our car windshield. Now, this has been shot up quite a bit, but we've inverted it, and we're going to be firing through areas that really aren't compromised. I'm going to mark those out when I shoot them. But we have our car windshield angled back approximately 45 degrees per the protocol, and we have our standard 1 gallon water jugs. Now these are approximately 5 inches thick, and typically what I see is approximately 1.5 times penetration as that you would see in ordnance gel. So ideally what we're looking for is penetration into this fourth jug, preferably with a dent or crack on the back fourth. Ideally that's where we want to get to, so we know we comfortably or exceeded that 12-inch minimum. If we get further than that, that's fine, but that's the kind of the baseline minimum we are trying to get for, is penetration into the fourth, preferably with that large dent or crack on the back of it. The jugs are placed about 18 inches behind the barrier per the protocol, so let's go ahead and see how this shakes out. First up, Winchester 127 grain plus P plus Ranger T. Let's go take a look. All right. Jug one is thoroughly destroyed, as we would expect. Jug 2 as well. I haven't seen any fragments yet, so far that's a good sign. Jug 3, 4. Well, I'll be darned. We may have gotten in the jug 5. And we did. Wow. That is actually a little surprising. Well, maybe there's a reason why this round does have a good reputation in law enforcement. So far, not seeing any reason why it shouldn't, but let's go ahead and dig that out of there and see how that looks. Well, guys, I have to say, color me impressed. The jacket held on. The design appears to have functioned pretty much as Winchester intended. I know that these rounds have gone through some redesign over the years. This is a 2019 production, so this is the latest production, but wow, that is actually quite impressive. I did not expect this to do as well as it did. So, well, we'll put some final thoughts on this one on the tailgate, but for now, that's oh, I didn't mention there was a dent on the back of Jug 5. So right now, this is that's actually pretty impressive. So color me surprised, but that's why we like to do these tests. Next up will be our 180 grain Federal HST. Let's go check it out. And let's see, jug 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. It's actually stuck in jug 5. So it came out of 4. And we actually stuck in backwards in jug 5. And of course that looks very similar to our 165 grain variant, except we have 20 extra grain, or 15 extra grains of mass, which allowed it to penetrate a little bit further, which is not surprising. That's pretty much exactly what you want. Let's see if I can get it out. There it is. And yes, that looks quite well. So not surprising. Jacket intact, bullet mostly intact, penetration spot on. Yeah, not surprising at all. I figured this one would do well, so no surprise there. I hit a little bit low, but we stayed within the full thickness of the jug, so it actually had fairly straight line penetration, but so no issue there. So yep, that looks good. This would be the 147 grain Speer Gold Dot G2, supposedly the round that wooed the FBI. Let's go take a look. All right, jug 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we cracked jug 6, and there it is. So far, I believe this is our best penetrating round yet, which pretty well lines up with the data that I've seen from Speer and from what the FBI claimed. Who knew? Okay. Well, let's go ahead, and we have room. We're going to hit the 10 millimeter. We're going to see if we can cause a nuclear explosion here with the best millimeter. I doubt it, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, we'll have some thoughts about that on the tailgate. This will be our 10 millimeter 200 grain XTP at approximately 1140 feet per second with a little modification, which we'll go more into once we get done with the test, assuming it works. All right, let's go see what we got. Okay, well, already got a little bit of a bad sign because we have jacket on the table, and you can see how shredded this is. Yep, the car windshield is just, it is a difficult barrier for a non-bonded or more purpose-built projectile. Looks like this would probably require an actual interlock band, such as what's on the Hornady Critical Duty, in order to maybe stay intact, because it just shredded it. But we still had a 200 grain projectile going out. The jacket normally weighs about 40 grains, so still probably have a 160 grain slug moving along. So let's see if we can find it. Jug 1 exploded off the table. Not surprising. 2, 3, 4, 5, and a dent on 6. So we didn't make it out of 5. let me go ahead and look around. I want to see if I could find that core. And we found the core. Looks good overall. Certainly had, because we started out with a 200 grain projectile, we had still had a significant mass penetrating through to an adequate depth, which was not surprising. But we can see the cantilever groove I placed in this projectile, which was effective in previous tests with the barriers we were using, just simply was not enough for this car windshield. And it's interesting, you can actually see it swage down the base of the bullet as it pulled that jacket off of the projectile. So that's really interesting. You probably would have to add either a double, which I'm not too concerned with that at the moment. That's kind of getting overboard. But maybe an interlocking band like on the critical duty would be required to actually hold that jacket on. So it's interesting to see Winchester's approach with the T-Series, where the copper jacket is pressed into the hollow point cavity to sort of prevent that from happening. And in this test, it did actually appear to work. So let's go ahead and take this back to the tailgate. We'll get some weights and whatnot, and we'll wrap this up. All right, guys, so what's the final thoughts on this? Well, before we get to that, let's go ahead and weigh these up. Our 40 cal, we're looking at 178. So 180 starting out, 178 finishing out. It looks like we probably lost a piece of jacket maybe right there, just a small piece. So overall, that looks pretty darn good, not surprising. 9mm, 127 grain. We're looking at 125-ish. So, again, only about 2 grains, which that is surprising for this projectile. I didn't expect, but again, it looks like right in this region we probably lost one of those talons, if you would, broke out. But, yep, overall pretty good. Our Speer Gold Dot G2, 147 starting out, 140-ish, 141-ish, so 6-7 grains. And you can see how that profile ended up. Interesting thing about the profile and how it affects penetration, and you'll see that here in a bit because we've seen this in the past with the original test we did with the cup and core 40 cal. But overall, it looks pretty decent. And of course, our 10mm. We're looking at 156, so about 44 grains, about what I expected losing that jacket. And again, I don't know if you can see how it swaged down the base of the bullet and actually peeled, just stripped that jacket off of there. So this will require a proper interlocking band in order to keep the jacket on, and it really is something I wish Hornady would do for the 10mm. But nonetheless, you can see we had sort of a similar profile was what ended up happening with the 9mm and the 10mm. In fact, pretty hard to tell those apart other than the color. So that's part of the reason for their penetration depths. Penetration depths on these were pretty much the same. Both exit out of the jug 5, Denning 6. I don't remember if this one cracked 6 or not. Either way, they both ended up outside of the jugs. So best penetration so far between the two, but obviously the 9mm did it with a lot less effort, if you would. So, what's some takeaways from all this? What's some final thoughts? Well, it's simple, guys. In the past, and I stated this before, I'm sure I'll continue to hear it in the comments. Stop worrying about calibers. Select a medium to heavyweight premium projectile and stop worrying about caliber. It's shot placement is what's going to make the most significant difference. As I stated in the last video, the manufacturers are designing the projectiles to meet the same specifications. So regardless of the caliber, they're essentially trying to come to the same conclusion. And the modern technology is allowing that to become a reality. The Speer Gold Dot G2, the FBI claimed was the highest scoring round in its protocol, and it's kind of the one that swayed them over to the 9mm full time. And we can see that, in fact, Speer's literature, which states this should have been around 14, almost 15 inches after auto glass, seems to hold true. If you do the calculations on 5 complete jugs, bounce off at 6, that's pretty much where we're at. And it even matched, even though this is an older bullet tech, it's just the point. It illustrates the point. The 10mm had the most raw horsepower out here, the most mass, the most velocity, the most energy. It had everything going for it, except, unfortunately, my modification was not enough to keep the jacket on there. However, that may not have necessarily shallowed up its penetration. In fact, it may have actually allowed it to penetrate a little further due to the profile of the core, how it actually came out. Had it all held intact and been more of a mushroom like the 40, might have seen similar penetration. Not sure, but you can kind of see how sometimes when these rounds go through windshields, it's just sort of a crapshoot. However, all of them met our minimum penetration depths, and there's really just nothing more to say, guys. These rounds all possess what it takes to be an effective law enforcement projectile. The tests show that. And I know in the comments I'm going to get, you should have used this bullet or that bullet, because that's all I've been getting. Every video, it's you need to try this bullet or this bullet. And guys, again, I don't know what to tell you. The results are what they are. It's starting to get to the point of splitting hairs when you're talking about the premium lines between these projectiles. Obviously, yes, I do know there are premium ammo. We've tested that in the past on channel for 10 millimeter, and I have no doubt the Gold Dot and HST would do quite well in this test from 10 millimeter. However, it does really go to show just how important bullet construction and whatnot is. So, with all this, Ranger 127 grain plus B+, well, it seems like I see no reason for it not to have a good reputation that it has. Gold Dot G2 does appear to do what the manufacturer claims it will do, and 180 grain HST is a solid performer. On one note, on the G2 and even the Ranger, and speaking with Speer, Winchester, and Federal, they seem to have moved away from the 4-layer addendum as their primary. It's not really a main focus when they're developing rounds for the law enforcement line. They're focused more on the FBI heavy clothing tests and auto glass. Those seem to be two of the biggest parameters. The 4-layer addendum seems to be just an afterthought now. So if you have rounds such as G2 and Ranger that maybe don't perform in a 4-layer addendum, that's not going to be surprising going forward. They seem to have said that the FBI heavy clothing test is de facto standard, and it is providing good results in real world. So that's what they're going toward. And it may be that this Ranger T-Series has been beefed up over the years to reflect that, and maybe that's why we got a little better performance than we expected. But Hornady, please lock the jacket to the core on the XTP. It's time to do an update on the XTP, because this is a good projectile for the 10 millimeter, and as we've seen in my testing in the past, even though it's not an interlock band, it helped. It helped a lot, actually. But that auto glass is just, that is a difficult barrier. And I really wish Hornady would upgrade the XTP, at least for the 10. Give us, if nothing else, some components to reload with. Add it to the mag line. Lock the jacket to the core, a 200 grainer. And maybe even, it'd be interesting to see them experiment with a 220 grain XTP with a lock jacket. That would actually be pretty interesting with the 10 millimeter. But what are you going to do? Guys, you can't be the best millimeter if 9 millimeter's beating you. Oh, I'm sure I'll hear it all in the comments. So, having said that, if you haven't already done so, please like and subscribe. Share the video. It helps the channel out. As always, comment down below and tell me what you guys think about all this. But, again, please keep the comments professional, and I'll see you guys next time.